Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Bears Pod with Parker Hurley. This is our, I think, a fourth episode now as we really get things rolling now every Tuesday and Thursday right here on follow me at Parker Hurley on Twitter. Follow us at beargoggleson.com. Go to beargoggleson.com and get all your information for the Chicago Bears. And obviously, this is an exciting episode because this is our free agency episode. We're going to be breaking down a lot of the big free agent deals, what they mean for the Chicago Bears. And fortunately, this hasn't been the most, stunning, crazy, things changing free agency period, but for the Chicago Bears, really more active than a lot of teams in the NFL. So, like I said, again, quick introduction. I'm Parker Hurley at beargoggleson.com, giving you the latest and greatest Chicago Bears needs. And just to kind of recap, we were on Friday. We did the live reaction podcast. We did the breaking news podcast reacting to DJ Moore and the Chicago Bears. Talking about the number 9 overall pick now and who they could be in line to get if they stay at number 9, and now that they traded down to number 9 and getting a future first, multiple second round picks, and DJ Moore. So for the most part, go listen to that podcast for a lot of my thoughts on DJ Moore and for my thoughts on the trade down. Obviously, really like it for the Chicago Bears. It opened up a lot of opportunities for them. And you see this wide receiver market, and you're seeing that Jacoby Myers is one of the only wide receivers to sign so far, and he signed for about $7 million. And then you see that DJ Moore signed for about $20 million. And some people are saying that he's a bargain at that price. So you're saying that the difference between DJ Moore, the top wide receiver that the Chicago Bears actually traded for, and Jacoby Myers, one of the highest paid free agents on the market, it's a huge difference in terms of the value that DJ Moore brings to this team. And the Chicago Bears just can't say that they could get the same value in free agency or anything along those lines. And the more you start to look into the DJ Moore trade, the more you say, wow, this is just such a dynamic fit with Justin Fields. And I talked about it on the last podcast and said, there's not going to be another AJ Brown trade where they trade for a wide receiver and the quarterback puts up MVP numbers and they go to the Super Bowl or anything like that. But if there's going to be the combination of Justin Fields is ascending and DJ Moore is ascending at the same time, and they just so happen to, Fields needs a receiver, Moore needs a quarterback, and they happen to hit at the same time, it still makes you think that this is going to be a really dynamic pairing. And one of the more interesting things that I looked at was DJ Moore is extremely dynamic when it comes to the deep ball. Just last season, 27.5% of his targets came on passes that were 20 yards down the field or further. The season before was about 16%, but in 2021, it was at 22%. And you saw, I think one of the things that changed that was Joe Brady came in, and in the first 2 years in the NFL, he was getting deep targets at about 11 to 14%. And then Joe Brady comes in and says, no, they were using you as a slot receiver. We're going to put you on the outside. We're going to put you in a role similar to somebody like Jamar Chase. And we're going to throw you footballs deep down the field. And over the last 3 seasons, you saw he really started to take advantage and really started to become one of the better deep ball passers or receivers in the NFL. He led the NFL in deep target rate, and he was 9th in yards in terms of deep targets or in terms of deep yards on passes 20 yards or further. This matters to me because who were his quarterbacks? Sam Darnold, who actually, when you look into the stats, a lot of the production that DJ Moore was producing 20 yards down the field and further was because of his connection with Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold actually was connecting deep down the football field. Okay. He also had, PJ Walker, Baker Mayfield. It was a disaster for the Carolina Panthers throughout the season. So you can say what you want to say about Justin Fields. You can say, is Justin Fields this great passer? Is he going to take that step, the way that Jalen Hurts did? Is he this, that, and the other? Can he make the right reads? Can he throw the football to the right people on time? I think a lot of those things are going to be, questions that are going to be answered. But I think the big thing that you take away from Justin Fields is what you can question his accuracy in that intermediate, and almost because he's a little slow to react, it affects his accuracy. But when he's pushing the football deep down the field, there aren't many quarterbacks in the NFL more accurate than Justin Fields. And you start to think about he's putting these deep passes on Dante Pettis, even Darnell Mooney, who's going to be a complimentary number two. You saw that from his statistics with Mitch Trubisky or with somebody like Nick Foles, where he just wasn't able to connect deep down the football field whatsoever, to once Justin Fields started to get into the mix, you started to say, oh, wow, Darnell Mooney he is a lot better of a deep ball passer than we realize. He is a lot, more dynamic than we realize because he's playing with somebody like Justin Fields. So if Fields can break that out of Darnell Mooney, you just have to think that DJ Moore, he's put up 12,000 or 1,200 yards in 3 seasons so far. Just last season, he was one of the more dynamic deep ball passers. You have to think that's going to be a huge fit. And one of the questions is that it's basically been one or the other for DJ Moore. It's basically been his first 2 seasons, he was an underneath target. Then in 2020, he's a deep ball target. Then in 2021, he's back to underneath, kind of because of the quarterback situation. Then in 2022, almost because of the quarterback situation, he's back to a deep ball target. But what you realize in both of this is DJ Moore is a target, he's able to catch the ball deep and make plays by tracking the football deep down the field. He's also a player that if you put the ball in his hands, he's going to make plays and make things happen with the football in his hands. He's going to be able to create separation in those 5 to 10 yard spaces. So you look at him and you say he's an all-around dynamic receiver. His best traits are his deep ball pass catching because the big plays come off of that. The field flipping plays, the touchdowns in his career have come when they've started to target him deep down the field. And Justin Fields just so happens to be better in that area. But you look at Luke Getsy in the Chicago Bears and you think that they're going to use him more dynamically in a variety of ways because they do view him as that A.J. Brown do everything number one type of receiver. And one of the more interesting things I saw finally to kind of wrap it up on DJ Moore is he was in his rookie season, he was insanely dynamic as a rushing player. He had like 150, 170 rushing yards, and he still had, 3 or 4 rushes a season after that. But he really was dynamic, getting jet sweeps, getting handoffs, getting things like that. And I've talked about it a ton with Luke Getsy. One of the things that he really likes to do with his receivers, and you've noticed it, is drafted Velus Jones, tries to get him involved with those jet sweeps, things like that. Dante Pettis has a couple carries himself. Equanimous St. Brown, they like to get him on the jet sweeps. They like to use him as a blocker on the jet sweeps, so it can be like a play action of sorts. You just look at any receiver that they've added since Luke Getsy has been the Chicago Bears offensive coordinator, and you say that player has been able to get the football in their hands in the running game as a receiver on jet sweeps, on end arounds and things like that. And you think DJ Moore was very dynamic in that in his first season, and they haven't been able to put together the fact that he was good in the middle of the field for a season. He was good deep for a season. He was good behind the line of scrimmage for a season. If you can put that all together, you really, like I keep saying, you don't want to say it's an A.J. Brown type of move, but with a player like Justin Fields, with a coach like Luke Getsy who can get the most out of him, with the fact that DJ Moore has shown in little bits and pieces and spurts that he can do all of these things that they need him to do, you have to think that, like I said, the more you dig into it, just the more excited you get about DJ Moore to the Chicago Bears. So it's really hard to find anything to get too disappointed about it. So, like I said, this is the Bears Pod with Parker Hurley. Check us out at beargoggleson.com. Just finishing up talking about DJ Moore, how I think it's going to be a really good fit, transitioning into could probably go time-wise with how some of these signings have leaked. In the first one here would be the Chicago Bears signing TJ Edwards. The first move really looked like a pretty good bargain, a 3-year deal worth $19.5 million. So about $6 million, less than $7 million per year for a starting caliber linebacker who started on a Super Bowl team last season. And the one, caveat, I guess you could say, is he was a UDFA. He has really like 2 full seasons, you could say, of starting experience. So, it kind of took him 2 seasons to, first season he barely played. Second season, he kind of moved up and became, a trusted starter. And then the final 2 seasons, he became a starter. But what you see from TJ Edwards, you have to really love not only, what he brings, but you have to love his fit with the Chicago Bears. And it's going to be hard to talk about TJ Edwards without talking about Tremaine Edmunds. And there's a few ways to think about the Tremaine Edmunds and TJ Edwards combination. And the first, if you think about it positively, you think about the idea that Matt Eberflus last season looked to play his linebackers, two linebackers, 100% of the time. It started with Nicholas Morrow and Roquan Smith. It turned into Jack Sanborn and Nicholas Morrow. And then as Sanborn got hurt, it became another person. I think Nicholas Morrow, by the end of the season, had missed like 2 or 3 snaps for the entire season. He was just an every down player. They relied on him. So the fact of the matter is that while some teams take their linebacker off the field for nickel, dime, and other situations, the Chicago Bears just don't do that. They play their 2 linebackers for 100% of the snaps. So you're going to need both linebackers here. The one thought was that Jack Sanborn would be, a really good linebacker to fill into this spot. One, he's a UDFA, so he comes cheap. Two, he's in his second NFL season. He's from Wisconsin, and his profile is almost the exact same as TJ Edwards. And when they signed TJ Edwards, you thought, oh man, the 2 UDFA Wisconsin guys, back to back, playing next to each other. The Chicago Bears, got a steal deal-wise with TJ Edwards. Jack Sanborn's a rookie UDFA. It's going to be a great deal for him. You put those two together, and all of a sudden you think the Chicago Bears really have something. And then they come in over the top and add Tremaine Edmunds. And all of a sudden, the Bears play 2 linebackers. They don't necessarily play 3. So the one thought you could have with this is, did they overpay Tremaine Edmunds because now Jack Sanborn's relegated to the Sam role, which means, 20 to 30% of the snaps played, when you thought that he, maybe we didn't think he could be a 100% snap player, but, the difference between 30% of the snaps and 100% of the snaps is pretty significant. So what they're really saying is that they don't trust Jack Sanborn to be that type of player, and that they specifically want TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmunds to be on the field 100% of the time. I think there's an argument to be made that the Chicago Bears could have not paid Tremaine Edmunds, and they could have gotten 100% of the snaps out of Sanborn and TJ Edwards. I also think when you look at this fit and you think about how dynamic it could be, and you think about how perfect it is, it's still hard to knock it because of especially how involved Matt Eberflus wants his linebackers to be in his defense. And like I said, when you think about the fit of Tremaine Edmunds is like 6'5", 250. He's an outlier in terms of his size is overarching, it's overbearing. And he's an athletic freak for his size, tested off the chain with the jumps, with the 40-yard dash, with the athleticism across the board, has insane arm length, can take up space just by his arm length. He's the physical freak of nature that you just can't teach. Then on the flip side, TJ Edwards comes in. He's undersized. He's only about 6 foot. He's 230 pounds. He's not even not even close to 240 pounds. The old size of linebackers in the NFL. You start to say, look at his athleticism. I think his, RAS score, a lot of people reference, is under 3, or it's about 3. He ran like a 4.8 in the 40. The reason that he ran so slow, or the reason that he was a UDFA, was because he ran so slow in the 40. But you see from TJ Edwards, the second you get him on the field, he's smart enough. He's instinctual enough. He is that Big Ten linebacker who can play in the box and can make those tackles. But what you've really noticed from him is that, a little undersized, maybe an oversized safety, maybe a slower safety, but in that box role where he's able to be instinctual against those tight ends, against those running backs on passes to the flats, he's able to read it and get out there, diagnose and make tackles on the football and make big plays in that regard. So you look at the combination and you say, okay, the undersized, lack of athleticism, but the guy who gets by because he's smart, savvy, and understands things, you pair him up with Tremaine Edmunds, who, on the flip side, Tremaine Edmunds is the oversized, the over-athletic, the guy who maybe it's not necessarily all there together, all the pieces, but you see bits and pieces come together, and you say that when it all starts to click for Tremaine Edmunds, it's going to be a really good fit. So the combination of, we have these 2 players who really stylistically fit with each other, that's where you could say, okay, they spent maybe a little bit more, and like I said, they could have potentially skimped and got by with Jack Sanborn and a rookie seventh round pick, or a late round guy, or a veteran, on the cheap. But they ended up spending for Tremaine Edmunds. Did they potentially overspend a little bit? Yes. Is the fit on the football field perfect? Are those two going to play off of each other perfectly? Yes, you could really see that. And I think when you discuss the roles, I think one thing that's going to be really interesting to me is who on the Chicago Bears is going to wear the green dot, because both of them did. One of the things that the Eagles loved about TJ Edwards is, especially last season, was they never had to take him off the field. They could rotate guys, Kaiser White, linebackers, this, that, the other, but the constant, steady guy in the middle was TJ Edwards. Then on the flip side, Tremaine Edmunds wore the green dot for the Buffalo Bills. He was the Mike in the middle, whereas Matt Milano was the Will, the run and chase type player. I think when you look at their profiles, you would say it would just be so hard to take Tremaine Edmunds away from the mic, because he's so big and so imposing in the middle of the football field. And he can do things in coverage, but I mean, one of the greatest traits that he has in coverage is that his body is so big, and that his length is so long, that when he sticks his hands up, out, or the other, he takes away throwing lanes in the middle of the field. So to have that player as that stout player in the middle of the field, and just to have that length and size, and even as you try to run at him, when you have those long limbs, it just makes it harder to run at somebody like him. Versus then the Will, TJ Edwards, you could say, when you look at it as a Wisconsin linebacker, I think he diagnoses the run well. As a short-limbed, slow linebacker who relies on diagnosing, I think you could say that, as a Mike in the middle of the defense, he could potentially get eaten up. When you put him in the Will, and you have him as that run and chase player who, like I said, can diagnose, can read the running back, and can get out to the flat at an angle that properly makes him an ability to, take on those tackles in space, where he's getting to the flats in space by reading and diagnosing, instead of taking on linebackers in the box, is basically where you would say that TJ Edwards would be better. So I think you put Tremaine Edmunds in the box as the Mike, you put TJ Edwards as the Will, and have him run and chase. Um, the Chicago Bears they've given the Will the blue or the green dot, though. So you could, and like I said, I don't think you're even worrying about which one comes off the field, because the Chicago Bears were playing Morrow and Roquan Smith 100%. You give Roquan Smith the green dot, but you still play Morrow 100% of the snaps. So even if Tremaine Edmunds doesn't have the green dot, TJ Edwards is, and even if TJ Edwards is the Will and not the Mike, TJ Edwards still isn't coming off the football field. So you still give him the green dot, in my opinion, because like I just said, you give the green dot to the kid that, the UDFA, who relied on the smarts, who relied on his ability to process, who relied on his ability to pick up a playbook faster than anybody, compared to the first round pick, who, not saying Edmunds has everything handed to him, and Edmunds is a 5-year starter in the NFL already. So, you're saying Edmunds has the experience, Edmunds has the understanding, and everything like that. But when you're comparing the two, I think you're saying, I want Tremaine Edmunds to play more loose, to play more free, to play more read and react. I want TJ Edwards to be the one getting everybody set before the snap. And then so that Tremaine Edmunds only has one singular focus or one understanding, and he's relaying off of TJ Edwards, and he's making plays based off of the keys and the reads from Edwards. But I think you want to see TJ Edwards be the one that, because he has that understanding, because I think he's made it this far based off of being that green dot, that alpha in the middle that gets everybody aligned. I think that's actually really a good fit for the Chicago Bears. So that should basically the linebackers there. And like I said, I think you could argue, the reality is that they could have paid Roquan Smith $20 million, and then they ended up paying Tremaine Edmunds and TJ Edwards about $23-24 million, and they got a second round pick from Roquan Smith out of it. When you look at it like that, you have to say it's a win for the Chicago Bears, and there's really no other way to argue about it. When you say that they could have spent $6 million on TJ Edwards, less than $1 million on Jack Sanborn, and invested $7 million on linebacker, and got the second round pick from Roquan, and put $13 million into the defensive line or something along those lines. Marcus Davenport, they just missed out on him. He signed $13 million. So would you have rather had, Marcus Davenport, and another piece, and still have some cap savings, or would you rather have Tremaine Edmunds? Will be an interesting decision there. So I'll take a drink here. But like I said, follow us at beargoggleson.com. Follow me at Parker Hurley on Twitter. We're talking about the Chicago Bears and their linebacker core. Bear down, like we got a comment here saying bear down. We're talking about the Chicago Bears. We just talked about the linebacker core, the big linebacker moves. And I just mentioned that had they potentially spent less on Roquan's, or potentially spent less on, Tremaine Edmunds. Yes, it is that they did spend less on Tremaine Edmunds than Roquan Smith. At the exact same time, they could have used those resources on the defensive line or something along those lines. And at this point, they still don't have too much going on in terms of defensive line play, but they missed out on really the two guys that you could say they could have transformed Tremaine Edmunds' money into either Zach Allen, who signed with the Denver Broncos, and then Zach Allen signing with the Broncos allows Draymond Jones from the Broncos to go to the Seattle Seahawks. Both of them get pretty significant money. You could argue about the positional value between those guys and Tremaine Edmunds. The Chicago Bears miss out on Draymond Jones, and they pivot to go to DeMarcus Walker from the Tennessee Titans. So it's going to be interesting. I think one thing that we're going to have to do is compare how DeMarcus Walker does compared to guys like Draymond and to Zach Allen. And we're going to have to say, would you have rather had Tremaine Edmunds and DeMarcus Walker, or would you have rather had a guy like Draymond Jones and somebody like Jack Sanborn is starting instead of Tremaine Edmunds, is going to be the question that we're going to have to ask. DeMarcus Walker is going to be an interesting one because when you look at him coming out of Florida State, there was so much hype about him at Florida State, and then he doesn't have a good combine, and then there's some questions about his character, but he falls into the second round, which really, when you look at his NFL combine and those things, it maybe necessarily wasn't even a fall, especially when you look at his first 4 seasons in the NFL. He's playing with the Denver Broncos. He's barely really even getting on the field. They couldn't find a great fit for him. They're swapping in between 3 technique and 5 technique. They're having defensive coordinators get fired. Vic Fangio comes in after Vic Fangio didn't draft Walker, and now he doesn't really fit the Fangio scheme. They're trying to move him from the 3 tech to the 5 tech, and just his first 4 seasons just aren't what you want from anybody whatsoever. And so he goes to the Houston Texans on just a really minimal deal, and the Texans are tanking, and the Texans just say, DeMarcus, just go out there and play up and down the defensive line and just flash and see what you can do. And he actually has a pretty good season. So the Tennessee Titans, because the Texans are tanking and nobody really watches the Houston Texans, the Tennessee Titans were watching them because they played him 2 times a season. And they said, who's this DeMarcus Walker? DeMarcus Walker seems to be flashing on tape. So they give him a low-end salary because he was still under the radar from his time with the Houston Texans. And Walker had a pretty nice season for the Tennessee Titans. He had 7 sacks. When you look at it and you compare it to, like I said, the Chicago Bears need so much defensive line help that when you compare it to guys like Trevis Gibson, when you compare it to Al-Qadim Muhammad, when you compare it to Dominique Robinson and Armon Watts and even Justin Jones, who's the best starter on the Bears defensive line, no matter how you look at it, DeMarcus Walker was the most productive player. He had more pressures than any Chicago Bear. He had more run stops than any Chicago Bear. He had a better pass rush win rate than any Chicago Bear. He had a better run stop rate than any Chicago Bear. However you break this down, DeMarcus Walker is an upgrade for the Chicago Bears defensive line. How much of an upgrade, I think, is the real question. The one other positive with DeMarcus Walker is that he can play up and down the defensive line. Like I said, drafted to play 3 technique. Fangio moves him to the 5. With the Titans, he's out on the edge, as a 7 or a 9. But even then, because the Titans have so many different pieces on their defensive line, they're shuffling him in and out. And I think this past season with the Titans, he actually played more versatilely than he did ever in his career. And he's already been versatile in his career. So you think that the Chicago Bears are probably going to move him up and down the defensive line. I think one of the questions with that is, is he a tweener? Does he have a real role? I think he can defend the run on the edge on early downs, and I think he can get upfield as a 3 tech on passing downs. I think the one issue with that is he doesn't like I said, with his NFL combine, he doesn't have the bend and he doesn't have the speed around the edges of pass rusher. He's really only an inside pass rusher and he's really only a power pass rusher. And he uses his length at times for pass rush, but really, if he's not winning with his ability to like get 2 steps and get power under him, then you're just not seeing much, and there's no speed to, not no speed, but you're not seeing the real speed to DeMarcus Walker's game that you could consistently trust him out on the edge. Like I said, on rundowns, because of his power, because he's able to use his length to set the edge, you can use him there and you can slide him inside on passing downs. But I just don't think he's a consistent player that can consistently play on the edge. So talking about DeMarcus Walker, thinking that, does he have a defined role? Are the Chicago Bears going to be able to use him? Well, the biggest question I have with him is that he's going to enter his 7th NFL season, and he has yet to play over 500 NFL snaps in a season. So, like I said, he actually had more pressures than Trevis Gibson. Trevis Gibson played 200 more snaps than him. I think it was about 60 more pass rush attempts. Trevis Gibson had 60 more pass rush attempts, and DeMarcus Walker had more pressures. That's great in terms of DeMarcus Walker is far more productive than Trevis Gibson on a snap-in, snap-out basis. It's also a question of how many times have the Chicago Bears been able to how often are they able to trust DeMarcus Walker? And if he plays more, is he going to produce at the same rate? Or is it the fact that he's a 20 to 30 snap player and we're just only going to get so much out of him? We got a great comment here from Joey Metzen. And like I said, everybody, follow BearGogglesOn.com. I'm Parker Hurley from BearGogglesOn.com. Follow us on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. For all your Bears insight, Joey, like I said, comment just like Joey if you want to get your question asked. He says, should the Bears go for an offensive tackle or a defensive lineman? And the way that this is shaking out, I think you have to say it's one or the other. I don't think there's really even any other position that the Chicago Bears should be debating at this point. They were just at the Northwestern Pro Day. They were just working out Pete Skoronski, intently. I don't think that's a lot of news because I think they're going to work out all the offensive tackles. I think they're going to be at a lot of pro days, and it just so happens the Northwestern Pro Day is today. But one reason it is news is that the Clemson Pro Day was today, and at the Clemson Pro Day, they could have went and checked out star defensive linemen such as Miles Murphy, such as Brian Breesy, maybe guys who would have been looked at as maybe picked a little high for number 9, but I think one thing that you could take away from today is they preferred to see the offensive tackle, and they didn't go to see 2 high-end defensive linemen who are expected to go in the first round from Clemson. Does that mean the Chicago Bears are leaning one way or the other for the 9th pick? I don't think so, and I think you could argue that if they draft Pete Skoronski, do they put him at guard? Is that a situation, along those lines? I don't even think that's necessarily a lock that he's even an offensive tackle. But I do think that, at this point you have to say, okay, Pete Skoronski over Miles Murphy and Brian Breesy. I also still think, though, that there's a right tackle out there. There's guys like Caleb McGarry. There's other right tackles out there that I still could see the Chicago Bears signing a right tackle. You have Braxton Jones at left tackle. Maybe Pete Skoronski's there and you plug him in at guard. But I think you have if you can sign a right tackle. Like I said, they missed out on Draymond Jones. They missed out on Zach Allen. Deron Payne didn't get to free agency. Javon Hargrave signed with a contender in the San Francisco 49ers. I look at DeMarcus Walker and see a guy who hasn't played 500 snaps in an NFL season, and this is his 7th NFL season, and say, if this is the only signing that you've made so far, my personal opinion, I think they're still going to go defensive line at number 9. Maybe it's not Miles Murphy. Maybe it's Lucas Van Ness. Maybe they haven't filled that 3 technique role. Maybe they're sitting back. Maybe the buzz that they heard at the combine was Jalen Carter's going to fall. Jalen Carter isn't. Jalen Carter's going to be there at 9. Chicago talked to 5, 6, 7, 8. They don't think they heard those teams are out on Jalen Carter. They think those teams have maturity issues. If Jalen Carter's there at 9, I think even if it's Jalen Carter versus Pete Skoronski from Northwestern, with it's Skoronski is the safe prospect, the player who has limited flaws in his game other than the arm length, and that you could argue that he's going to be a guard, but he's going to be a great guard. There's limited questions about him, but the ceiling isn't as high as, he's not going to be a franchise-changing left tackle. He's going to be a solid left tackle at best, and he's going to be maybe a franchise changing guard, which isn't, as same as a franchise changing left tackle, versus if Jalen Carter is there, and that's a franchise changing defensive lineman, and that's a player that could, has all the upside in the world. Pete Skoronski has all the floor in the world. Now all of a sudden we're questioning Jalen Carter's floor and saying, does Jalen Carter have the same floor? Does he have issues that are going to bring down the floor? But do you swing for the fences with Carter and say, we were just debating him at number 1, and now we get the number 1 overall pick in our minds in Jalen Carter. We get the number 1 overall pick. We get a first rounder next year. We get DJ Moore and we get 2 seconds, and we still land Jalen Carter. I think there's some point where you say maturity questions. We have to sign Jalen Carter. So I think we still want to get to the Nate Davis signing, and I think that is going to impact, like you kind of talked about. I think we have like 5 minutes here to kind of wrap things up. So yeah, Joey, if you have any other comments or any other questions here, I think the Chicago Bears are in an interesting spot. And follow me at beargoggleson.com and at Parker Hurley. The Nate Davis signing really makes this thing interesting because he spent his entire career at right guard. And now the question is going to be, when you looked at the Chicago Bears offensive line, you said they have a serious question at center. They have a serious question at left guard. They have a serious question at right tackle. But at least they have Tevin Jenkins at right guard. And at least Braxton Jones showed something as a rookie at left tackle. And now you look at it and say, well, they just signed Nate Davis, who plays right guard. Is he going to take Tevin Jenkins' spot? Does Tevin Jenkins shift out to right tackle? Does Nate Davis, the interesting thing about Nate Davis is he played left tackle at Charlotte. And similarly to, like I just mentioned with Pete Skoronski, sometimes your arm length limits you from being an offensive tackle in the NFL, and they push you inside to guard. Happened to Nate Davis. It just so happened that they didn't push him from left tackle to left guard. They pushed him from left tackle to right guard. And so he's played the left side before. He hasn't played left guard before, but he's played the left side before. Do they move him to left guard? But then you say they just paid him $10 million, and now they're going to ask him to change positions and play a position that he's not necessarily familiar with. But then you say Tevin Jenkins just had a great season at right guard. We thought we were going to move on from him. He was the only stable offensive lineman we had. And now we just signed, the first person we signed is to replace him, and we still have holes everywhere else. That's where it becomes interesting with what the Chicago Bears are going to do with Nate Davis. So I think we're going to pick that one up on Thursday, talk more about where Nate Davis fits, how Nate Davis is going to fit with the Chicago Bears, who's going to play right guard. Are they going to sign a center by them? I still think the right tackle market is wide open for the Chicago Bears to potentially go and get a right tackle. Somebody like Caleb McGarry is still out there. And a lot of people are saying Caleb McGarry's market is not picking up because he was in such a run heavy scheme with a quarterback who was mobile, and it wasn't a real drop back pass scheme. The Chicago Bears should be sitting there saying, we'll take the discount because that's our scheme. He fits perfectly for that. So are the Chicago Bears just waiting for the market to get cooler and cooler to take the discount and to sign a guy like Caleb McGarry? And that would obviously change their draft opinions and everything like that. And that would be something that hopefully we'll talk about on Thursday when it comes. Tune in, same time on Thursday. And follow me at beargoggleson.com. Follow me at Parker Hurley, and we'll talk to you guys later.